I spoke at the Biohacker Summit. They had me speak on biohacking versus ancestral living. And the second time, last year, I spoke on biohacking versus natural living, part 2. And so this morning, I'm going to speak on poop, actually. So we're going a different direction this year. But for me to be able to get up on stage for 40 minutes and talk about poop is amazing. I mean, it's one of those things that I normally have to reserve for conversations with my 9-year-old boys, and now I get to talk to you guys about it. So, of course, everyone's sitting here, and we don't want to sit all day. So everybody stand up. Stand up. Everybody's used to me getting up here and giving you special exercises to do during the day. And before we get going, could I get my slides up? Would that be possible? There we go. Decoding your microbiome, the ultimate gut hack, sounds a lot more advanced than poop, but basically we're just talking about poop. And because they don't give me much time up here, we've just got like 35, 40 minutes, I'm going to start you guys into one of my favorite it's actually a kind of a poop-inducing exercise, but it's also great for getting the blood flowing in the morning. It's the shaking exercise, a little bit of Qigong shaking. Just begin to shake your whole body. You can shake to the right, you can shake to the left. Sometimes when you do this, if you want to activate your vagus nerve, you can kind of hum or chant like a Okay, keep shaking, but shut up, because I got to talk while you're doing this. All right, so as we introduce the biome, you guys keep shaking. Keep shaking. Can someone tell me how I get my actual slides to advance? There we go. Boom. Just click. Just click. Boom. You have bacterial DNA in your genes. Keep shaking. I just want to tell you a few cool things about your microbiome. You have bacterial DNA in your genes. Say click and you'll just advance it because this isn't working. All right, if I say click the whole time that we're talking, you guys are doing a great job shaking, by the way. You know, I do this for 5 minutes in the morning, so I know you can do it for 5 minutes. Just keep moving. It feels good, doesn't it? Get that nitric oxide flowing. So every time I say click, you'll advance it because this isn't working. All right, so if you guys hear me say click, that's why I'm saying click. All right, click. Click. There we go. You are more bacteria than human. You actually have more bacteria in your body, 10 times more bacteria in your body than you do human cells, possibly even more than that. You are all walking around not fully human. All right, and most of you, hopefully all of you, are actually comprised more of bacterial cells than human cells. Click. Your belly button, I don't know why some of these things you can't see, but your belly button actually harbors its own unique set of bacteria. They actually have this thing, it's called the Belly Button Diversity Project. Your belly button has like 600 of its own belly button genes right there in your belly button. Different parts of your body have different, your dominant hand has a completely different set of bacteria than your non-dominant hand. What do you think determines this? Which hand do you wipe with, right? No, it's actually one hand that you do more things with has a different type of bacteria in it than other hands. Click. Click. Your yogurt may cure depression. Yogurt may cure depression. Isn't that interesting? You can actually change, and I have a friend who actually traveled to the Hazda hunter-gatherer tribe, hung himself upside down by a bicycle and used the equivalent of a turkey baster to inject hunter-gatherer tribe poop into his backside, and it actually began to change his personality. It began to change his weight. It cures things like depression and anxiety. You don't have to stick poop up your butt. You can actually just put yogurt in the front side and achieve the same thing. But probiotics are now being used to cure depression and anxiety because all these bacteria that are inside of you, keep shaking, just until I'm done with this first part. All those bacteria inside you actually affect your mood, depression, and anxiety. So what you're about to discover about taking care of your microbiome can actually help you be happier and feel better during the day. Click. This is fun. Bacteria have gender preferences. Guys, you've heard that you stink more. There's a reason for that. There's actually a type of bacteria that prefers males, that lives on males. And it might be an evolutionary mechanism to attract females to us somehow, even though these days it seems to detract females from us. But basically, you have a completely different set of bacteria that make you stink. The next time you have BO, blame it not on you, but on the little cells living inside you. Click. Your throat can tell you if you're going to get sick or if you're going to go crazy. They've studied schizophrenics. Schizophrenics actually have a completely different set of bacteria inside of their throats compared to regular people. So actually the type of bacteria that you have and that you take care of can not only affect your mood, but your propensity to be that crazy cat lady or crazy cat guy or not. Click. All right, you can sit down. Speaking of belly button, I always have to show a photograph of myself with a belly button. The reason I'm showing you this was me back in college. This is how I got interested in the human body, by the way. Actually, everybody stand up one more time real quick. I know. You feel that tingling in your fingertips? Like lay your fingers after doing all the bouncing. Everybody feel that? That's nitric oxide. You got a big release of nitric oxide. Feels great. All right. That's one of the reasons I do this every morning. It's like Viagra for your whole body when you just shake like that. That nitric oxide reaches your fingertips. All right, let's keep going. So this was how I first got interested in hacking the human body. It was as a bodybuilder trying to figure out how to put on as much muscle and lose as much fat as possible. I eventually realized that wasn't healthy, click. And so I moved on to next least healthiest sport on the face of the planet, and I did Ironman triathlon and triathloning for 8 or 9 years. And during this time, I began to study how to eat, how to fuel the human body during exercise, and got very, very interested in nutrition. And so I studied that for a long time while I was doing these Ironman triathlons, click. And now what I do is I enhance my biome by click. Sorry, you're not hearing my clicks. I said click right there. You got to work on your cat-like reflexes. So now I roll around in the dirt, which is actually great for your biome, and I do Spartan racing. So this is another sport that lets me get in touch with nature, and actually it really is true. People are selling now. Has anybody heard of the companies like AO Microbiome that are selling like a spray that you can spray on your skin to increase the diversity of the bacteria on your skin's microbiome, but you can also just go outside and roll around in the dirt or do a Spartan race and achieve the same thing at a fraction of the cost. All right, click. I'm here with my wife and my twin boys. My wife is here making one of the things that she makes quite often at home that you're going to learn a little bit about, fermented foods. And this one, she's making a kimchi, and she's actually here today. Jessa Greenfield, you can say hi to her if you see her wandering around. And my twin boys over there, they are also big foodies. They've got a food podcast where they make these amazing foods. I'm going to give them a shameless plug. It's called the Go Greenfields Podcast. Their last episode was bone broth colostrum donuts. So you should definitely check out that show. If you see the two little boys running around here as well, that's what they do. Click. All right, let's talk just a little bit about the microbiome before I launch into the best tips that I have for you on how to enhance it. I'm going to keep looking back at the screen here because I don't have my screen in front of me. 90% of diseases can be traced back to the gut and the health of the microbiome. There's very few parts of our body that we can say that about. So this is probably one of the most important things that you can do for longevity and the absence of chronic disease. 10 to 100 trillion is the number of cells that are harbored inside of your body and that make up, when you hear me saying microbiome and microbiota, that is what I am referring to, okay? Those 10 to 100 trillion cells. Click. 10,000 is the number of different microbe species that are identified inside the human body, and 10 times as many outside organisms as there are human cells in the body. This again means that you are more something alien to you, something outside of you, than you are actually human, sitting there right now. And some of you who have not used the restroom yet this morning are even more than that, based on what happens to be hanging around inside of you. Click. So one thing I wanted to point out, let's go ahead and skip this one because I want to say something else. So click. One very important thing, and by the way, I'm going to make all these slides available to you guys for anything that I fly through here. But one very interesting thing, look at this. 99% of you sitting right there, you're identical to each other. So the person sitting beside you, you're 99% identical to that person. But there's 80 to 90% difference in terms of the microbiome that's inside the person sitting next to you. So if you look at your human cells, right? You're 99+% identical to the person beside you, but then when you look what's inside you, 80 to 90% difference. This is why it's important, in my opinion, to pay attention when I tell you about how to quantify your microbiome, how to test your microbiome, because everybody has their own unique microbiome. I just started testing mine, and I now track it every 6 months, what's going on with my own internal microbiome, because The diet recommended for one person may not work when it comes to you. That being said, there are specific things that you actually can do, click, to eliminate your propensity to be predisposed to all of these different diseases that are connected to the microbiome, right? Cancer, fatigue and joint pain, brain disorders, cognitive decline. Does anybody know, by the way, why a lot of this stuff is like brain, schizophrenia related? My clicker is working now, it would appear. Maybe. No. Does anybody know why a lot of these brain-related disorders are so tied to the gut? The second brain, exactly. As you're forming embryonically, you have a central nervous system and what is called an enteric nervous system. And the two form at the same time, but they're connected by a nerve that wanders throughout the entire body, a nerve that you just stimulated by bouncing up and down before I began launching into the biome. Does anybody know the name of that nerve? The vagus nerve, yes, the vagus nerve wanders through the whole body and connects these two nervous systems. So your gut is connected to your brain and your brain is connected to your gut. That's why right before I got up on stage here, if I would have had butterflies in my stomach, which I didn't because you guys are all amazing and I didn't have to be nervous about coming up here and talking to you. But if I would have had butterflies in my stomach, that could have affected my brain function, and vice versa. If I would have been nervous, it could have created butterflies in my stomach. So the two are related, very, very interestingly. But regardless of any of these diseases, there's one specific thing that's probably the best thing that you could do for your microbiome when it comes to caring for your microbiome. Click. Obviously, it's probably not rocket science for you to know this, but studies, diet and reproducibility alters the gut microbiome. Diet rapidly and reproducibly alters the gut microbiome. Your diet is the number one thing that's going to influence what's living inside you, period. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for coming. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, first of all, is the antimicrobiome diet, right? If we were going to grow as much bad bacteria as possible and just kill the good bacteria as much as possible, what would we want to do? So let's look at what research tells us about how to completely F your microbiome. Click. No, you're okay. You're good. I'm okay. I'm working now? Oh, amazing. Oh, were you guys getting sick of me saying click? I thought it was fun. It was like I had Tourette's or something. We should have come up with a different word though, like Mary Poppins. All right, so effective diets high in refined sugars, low and high in refined sugars on gut transit, biometabolism, and bacterial fermentation. In a nutshell, what this study tells us is that one of the number one things that will create not just rampant inflammation in the gut, which is one of the best ways to destroy a lot of your good bacteria, but that's also going to feed a lot of the things that are going to cause the bad bacteria to overgrow. Things like candida, yeast, fungus, etc., would be that nice bowl of whole grain cereal that's presented to you, right? Refined carbohydrates and refined grain products in this study were actually shown to be one of the things that causes your microbiome to suffer. And so when you're pouring yourself, that big bowl of cereal flakes, or you're having the whole grain bread that's actually more refined than you actually think it is because it hasn't been slow fermented or it hasn't been prepared the right way, these refined grain products are actually horrible for your microbiome. Okay, so this whole idea of, eat brown grains to support your gut, that's actually not really going to work if they've been refined or if they've been processed, which many of the packaged foods that we get these days actually are, right? Case in point, when we were at the hotel this morning for breakfast, they have the entire healthy section, right? The gluten-free section with all the crackers and the breads and the gluten-free products. All of those have actually been shown to be horrible for the microbiome. Who would have known, right? That I get up here and tell you that eating gluten-free is bad for your gut, but it actually is, because even a lot of these gluten-free products, they're highly refined and highly processed, and in many cases, some of them aren't grains, but at the same time, you're going to find many of these things, like these refined oat products, refined rye products, barley, wheat, a lot of them aren't the best things for your gut. Now, in addition to that, diet-induced dysbiosis of the microbiota, and again, at the end of this presentation, I'll show you where you can get a lot of these slides to look at in greater detail. This found that another thing that affects the microbiome is, of course, as you're probably not going to be surprised by, the level of inflammation in your gut. Well, it turns out one of the number one things that causes inflammation in the gut, in addition to vegetable oils, is, what do you guys think? Added sugars, right? I know everybody probably did not have Fruit Loops for breakfast this morning, but sugars, or the equivalent of sugars, right? Organic agave cane syrup or cane sugar extract, or any of these things that are disguised as sugars in a lot of these foods that we eat, you really actually need to limit those if you want to care for your microbiota. About the only time you'd want sugars in your diet is when your body is very insulin sensitive and it's going to go from your bloodstream straight into being burnt for energy. So this would be prior to exercise or during exercise would be about one of the only times you would want these processed or these sugars sent to the body, because otherwise they are going to ferment in your gut and they are going to feed out a lot of these good or a lot of these bad bacteria. Okay, the next one, next interesting one is fermented milk products. Well, it appears that fermented milk products are actually quite good for feeding the microbiome, right? Things like dairy, yogurt, kefir, etc. The problem is, even if it is a fermented dairy product, most of the time if you're buying it from the grocery store and you look at the label and it's actually been pasteurized, if it's been pasteurized, what are you going to miss out on? Heat pasteurization, what does it do? It kills the bad bacteria. What does it do to the good bacteria? It kills the good bacteria, right? So in an ideal scenario, you're eating or consuming dairy that's been very, very low heat pasteurized, in addition to being fermented, or you're looking for a raw source, right? You're hunting down the farm that has the goat milk or the cow milk that's in its raw form, because in many cases, when you're consuming a fermented dairy product, if it has been pasteurized, it's not necessarily bad for the microbiome, but it's not feeding the microbiome, but the fats are separated from the proteins. You can have autoimmune reactions. So be careful with the pasteurized dairy products as well, even if they are fermented, like yogurt, kefir, etc. Now, of course, the meat, dairy, and plant proteins have the ability to alter the bacterial composition of the gut. And in the case of meat and dairy, there are, of course, a few things that you should think about, right? What's a lot of meat fed these days, especially in the US, but this happens all over the world. Antibiotics, right? So you can a lot of times consume meat that has antibiotics in it, or chicken that has antibiotics in it. What's another thing that feedlot cattle are given, or chickens are given in many situations? Yeah, corn, soy, wheat, a lot of these things that are full of omega-6 fatty acids, low in omega-3 fatty acids, and we know that these things cause inflammation in the gut. And again, inflammation in the gut is one of the key factors tied to lack of a robust microbiome, right? So when you are choosing organic meat, or when you're getting meat from a farm, rather than getting the conventional meat, poultry, and eggs, you're actually taking care of your microbiome, okay? So conventional meat, poultry, and eggs would be another thing to be very careful with if you wanted to enhance your microbiome from a dietary standpoint. Inflammatory disease in the microbiome, of course, this I just went through, the fact that immunosuppression and destruction of good bacteria happens in an inflammatory state. But of course, one of the key things that increases the amount of inflammation in the digestive tract, in addition to added sugars, would be these same things that can sneak into many of the so-called healthy foods that we consume, right? When I'm traveling here and I go through the healthy food section at the airport and I flip over the apple chips and it says organic apple chips, which could actually do a good job feeding the good bacteria in my gut, but then it's accompanied by the two next ingredients. Has anybody looked at the apple chips at the airport? Or these healthy bagged apple chips? What are the next two ingredients? It's like canola oil and organic cane syrup, right? So we're talking about things that, again, might appear to be healthy on the outside, but you need to look for a lot of these hidden variables if you want to make sure that you've got the most optimized microbiome possible. Again, without injecting Hazda hunter-gatherer tribe poop into your backside. Fats influence the microbiome as well. How many of you in here are doing like the warrior coffee thing, the fat in your coffee, butter coffee thing? I did it this morning, right? So this is really interesting. There's a dark side to coconut oil, the high consumption of these saturated fats and these butters in your coffee. Or you know, if you're one of those people who's doing coconut oil, not that anybody in here would do this, coconut oil, ketones, butter, high-fat diet all day long. This has been shown, especially in the presence of saturated fat consumption from coconut oil, to cause rampant inflammation in the gut unless it's accompanied by a second factor. What's that second factor that you have to include if you're going to do a lot of these like fat coffees, coconut oil type of things in your diet? Fiber, yes. We have a very smart person sitting in the front here. I got to cut you off. You're answering all the questions. Fiber. Okay, so if you're going to be like so if you had the fat in your coffee this morning, You shouldn't be doing necessarily like another fat in your coffee thing for lunch, for example. You should be having like a big bed of plants for lunch, or some of the fermented vegetables I'm going to talk about later, and roasted vegetables with dinner. So the idea is, I'm not a fan of this ketogenic diet thing, especially when it comes to the gut microbiome, unless it is a plant-rich ketogenic diet, a plant-rich ketogenic diet where you're eating a rainbow of colors. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about vegetables and vegetable choices. Trans fats, hydrogenated fats, blah, blah, blah. I probably don't need to tell you that, the packaged up margarine or packaged peanut butter, et cetera, is not great for the microbiome. So, what would you want to do if you did want to support the microbiome? The microbiome diet, what would you eat if you wanted to do as much good for your microbiome as possible? Well, first of all, we know that, like I just alluded to, a low fiber, low plant diet can cause actual extinction of the good gut bacteria inside of you, okay? I'm trying to stick to things that we've actually looked at in terms of science when it comes to the microbiome. And so based on this, one of the best things that you can do, at the upgraded dinner that we had last night, how many of you were there, by the way? It was amazing, amazing dinner. Well, one of the key things that we had as part of that dinner was Jerusalem artichokes, and there were quite a few jokes going around about them being fartichokes or fartshables or Jerusalem artichoke on your farts. And the reason behind that is they're so high in inulin. They're so high in fiber. I learned last night they're actually used industrially to make ethanol. That's how powerful they are. So a lot of these type of plants, though, that are high in inulin and high in fiber, you have to be careful with excessive consumption, especially if you have like a bacterial overgrowth. But at the same time, these are the fibers that actually help to feed the good bacteria in your gut, right? So fresh vegetables, a lot of times in their raw form, are excellent for feeding the gut and should be included in a diet designed to improve the diversity of the microbiome. Now, as I'm talking about vegetables, one thing that I wanted to mention is this idea of cooperative foods. So when you look at cooperative foods, what that means is a little hack. Can't come up here and give a talk at a biohacking summit without saying hack at least once, right? So one way to hack your diet is to consume cooperative foods. What this means is you take a fiber-rich food and you combine it with a probiotic-rich food, right? So like chia seeds in yogurt, right? That's a great cooperative example of a way to fuel your microbiome. What's another popular one? Like when you have sauerkraut with some kind of a bean or a legume, right? That stinky meal that you might have for dinner, that's actually fantastic for your microbiome. What would be another one? We could do like a flaxseed with a kefir, right? Or we could do for one example of a cooperative food that's just one food by itself would be kimchi, right? Because kimchi is fermented, but then the cabbage already has the fiber in it. So anytime you can combine a prebiotic fiber-rich food with a food or a separate food that has probiotics in it, it's fantastic for the biome. That's called cooperative eating. Okay, we also know that fiber-famished gut microbes are linked to poor health, and this would be another study that looks at the importance of fiber. And we know that the foods that have more anthocyanins, more polyphenols, this concept of eating the rainbow, this helps tremendously with diversity of the gut microbiome. That's why I love coming to Finland, because not only does Finland have a lot of these natural foods that are harvested, but one of my favorite low glycemic index ways to introduce color into my diet without eating lots of the fructose from fruits would be what? What's one really, really good way to get lots of these procyanins and anthocyanins and polyphenols in the diet? Guys, sea buckthorn berries, cranberries, like the little tart sour berries. Those are fantastic for your biome. They don't spike fructose and blood sugar levels, and you're getting lots of fiber along with them. You're getting color along with them. So berries especially. I don't do a ton of fruits, but one of the fruits that I will do a lot of is any type of berry, because I know it's not spiking my sugar as much and it's still increasing the diversity of my microbiome. Culinary herbs and spices, they've done studies on this and found them to be particularly good for the biome as well, right? So in your cupboard or in a central place on your shelf should be a lot of these turmerics, curries, spices, cayennes, ginger. Any of these spices should hold a place in your home, and you can combine these with a lot of these cooperative foods as well, right? So you could do like a yogurt with chia seeds, but then in addition to that, you could add like a Ceylon cinnamon, or you could add a little bit of a spice like a turmeric or a curry. Herbs and spices, though, have been shown to be particularly good for the microbiome, and so those should also be included. Falling into that same category because of the tannins that are in some of these foods, you can also find tannins in what? Tea, wide variety of tea, right? Black teas, green teas, any of these teas that kind of make your mouth pucker a little bit. Even coffee, the tannins in coffee, all of that is great for your biome, okay? So any of these things that have a little bit of a mouth puckering effect. The next one would be, of course, fermented foods, and we're all well aware of fermented foods and their effect on the microbiota. I don't want to preach to the choir, but go out of your day or go out of your way to not just take a probiotic, right? And not just to cycle through different probiotics throughout the year, so you're introducing a wide variety of ferments into your gut, but also when you're eating fermented foods, don't just be a yogurt person, don't just be a kefir person, right? Mix a wide variety of fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, any of these foods that are fermented. Chocolate counts, hooray, as a fermented food, but look into as many different fermented foods as possible and introduce a wide variety into the diet. The next one would be omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids from wild-caught fish, from fish oil. These also appear to have a really positive impact. And the other cool thing is that they can displace a lot of the issues with omega-6 fatty acids. So if you are like a nut and a seed butter person and you got to have your almond butter or your cashew butter and your handfuls of nuts, try to get a lot of fish oil, sardines, mackerel, cold water fish. You've got a lot of great sources for that here in Finland. But get a lot of omega-3s into your diet, especially if you're doing lots of these seeds and nuts and omega-6s, and especially if you're still having to eat commercial meat because of travel or other obligations, all right? So be really careful to get a lot of omega-3s in the diet. And then finally, healthy fats, right? What are some of the healthy fats that should hold a place in our home and not be present next to canola oil and safflower oil and sunflower oil? What are some of the healthier fats? Anybody want to throw a few out there? Of course, extra virgin olive oil. Or some of the others. Avocado oil, we have at our house. Macadamia nut oil is a really good one. Butter and ghee are really good. Coconut oil, of course, is very good. Those are some of the main fats you're going to find hanging around my house, right? So you want to make sure that you've got a good wide variety of low smoke point and high smoke point oils to cook with, but you also want to make sure that they're actually stable at high temperatures, the ones that you're cooking with, and they're naturally processed fats. So healthy fats appear to do a really good job for the microbiome as well. The Hadza hunter-gatherers, they actually do, these folks who Jeff Leach hung out with for the American Gut Project, the guy who I was talking about who hung himself upside down. These Hadza hunter-gatherers, go read this study that I'll link to, but their diet's really, really interesting. They do a lot of these baobab fruits and baobab powders, but they also do a lot of these legumes and beans, and you'll find this in the diet. Has anybody ever read Blue Zones? The book Blue Zones, where they have like a Venn diagram of what the healthiest, longest living people on the face of the planet actually do. And we see lack of smoking, no surprises there, right? We see low-level physical activity throughout the day. We see high consumption of wild plants. We see, and there's really just 5 variables, love and good relationships. And the 5th variable is they all eat legumes. Right? It's actually part of their diet, and preferably legumes that have been soaked and sprouted or fermented, treated properly to deactivate a lot of the digestive enzyme inhibitors or the things that have high amounts of phytic acid in them. So you need to treat your legumes properly, but it turns out that a lot of these stinky fart-producing foods like lentils and beans are actually good for your diet for a reason. So include a lot of these ancient grains and legumes or beans. And then finally, one very, very important thing is drinking red wine and eating chocolate. These are actually things that do not kill the micro. Now, alcohol is, of course, inflammatory and toxic in excess, but glass of red wine, a little bit of dark chocolate at the end of the day, I should be hearing a big hooray from everybody. Can everybody say, hooray! Red wine and dark chocolate are good for your biome. All right, so red wine, dark chocolate, anything with cacao in it. Chocolate is actually a fermented food in many cases. So this would be also something very, very important to include in your diet. So everybody be sure to do your red wine and your chocolate, along with your farting vegetables. Now, I know that it's a lot of things to think about, but really when a plate is put in front of me, I ask myself 2 questions. Is it nutrient dense and is it digestible? Right? Take one of those grains that I talked about, for example, quinoa. Is quinoa nutrient dense? Especially compared to like rice, for example? Absolutely. Quinoa is a pseudo grass / grain. It's got a lot of amino acids in it. It's got a lot of fatty acids in it. Is quinoa digestible in its native form? No, it's got a built-in mechanism that's designed to make mammals eat it and poop it out elsewhere so it can propagate. It's called saponins, right? Quinoa is covered in a soap-like irritant for the digestive tract, and the only way to deactivate that is to rinse your quinoa or to soak it and then rinse it again and use a glass mason jar to strain it and get rid of that water. And then in South America, they'll use that water to wash their clothing. It's so high in soap-like contents. So you can take that quinoa and you can render it both nutrient dense, and then once you've prepared it properly, digestible, right? So if a plate of quinoa is in front of me, I know it's been prepared properly, I know it's nutrient dense and digestible, and I won't wind up with quinoa in my crap. Now, how about sugar? Is sugar digestible? Yeah, absolutely. You start digesting sugar as soon as it hits your mouth. The salivary amylase in your mouth starts digesting the sugar. But is sugar nutrient dense? Unless you're like chewing on sugar cane, right, with fiber and some of the nutrients in it, absolutely not. Right, so sugar would not fall into the category of being something nutrient dense and digestible that I'd eat. And you'd be surprised at just these two questions, filtering your plate through these two questions. Is it nutrient dense and is it digestible? Will allow you to choose a lot of these healthy foods. Now, I also told you that I was going to mention the best way to actually test your gut. Over in the US, there's a company called Viome, which is doing a full sequencing of the gut microbiome. So for those of you who have access to a US address or can get over to the States, doing a test like this once or twice a year is a really good way to keep your finger on the pulse of your biome. And I have a video on my website where I walk through my own results. There's a company out here I noticed that is also doing, I don't think they're doing a full sequencing of the microbiome, but they're also looking at some of the key bacteria in your gut. There are also these stool panels, and you want to get the stool panels that are like a 3-day stool panel where you essentially poop into the equivalent of a hot dog tray for 3 days in a row, and then you send your poop off to these facilities to be analyzed. And this will look at bacteria, yeast, fungus, parasites, etc. So I test my gut at least once a year, and right now, I've got 3 poop test kits stacked in my office, and I'm actually very, very into seeing what's going on within my microbiome. So if you haven't yet tested your gut, if you haven't yet looked at the bacterial diversity, if you haven't yet looked to see if you have overgrowth of specific bacteria, it's a good idea. Now, a few more quick tips here. I said to eat cooperative foods and to eat the rainbow, eat air. So there's a very, very interesting study that shows that air contains microbes from the soil, and when you go outside and you deep breathing, I have one friend who will bend down and take the dirt on his fingertips and lick the dirt wherever he's at in the world to increase his cooperation with the environmental microbiome. You don't have to bend down and lick the dirt, but you can literally just breathe the air. Get outside and breathe the air, and you actually increase the diversity of your microbiome there. And I figured, and this is actually specifically for my friend Ollie, Dr. Ollie over here, I could not go through an entire presentation without showing a photograph of 2 chimpanzees making love on stage, because I don't think that's ever appeared at a Biohacker Summit before, monkeys having sex. So we can officially say that monkeys having sex have appeared on a slide at the Biohacker Summit. I figured you would appreciate that, Ollie, because monkeys having sex are funny no matter where you're at in the world. Anyways, though, they've actually done a study on chimpanzees, and they've found that those who have a more robust love life, shall we say, actually have increased microbial diversity because of that exchange of microbes with the partner. So this works 2 ways, right? Make love, not war, and be willing to get in touch, close touch in many cases with other people, but also know that it works both ways, right? So if someone has like MRSA or staph or some other microbiome issue, that can also be transferred. So you need to be careful to choose your partner wisely. However, it turns out that even something as simple as sex, touching, relationships, etc., and it doesn't have to be with a monkey, can actually improve your bacterial diversity. So finally, don't forget a few other quick things. Outdoor physical activity, great for diversity. Pets, what's the #1 pet that increases microbial diversity? More than cats, more than fish? Dogs, specifically dogs. Something weird about dogs and owning a dog. This is the one pet that increases microbial diversity. I know it's hard to see the orange font up here. Being outdoors, keeping stress low, which keeps inflammation low. Of course, low antibiotic exposure. I don't have to tell you that. Testing your environment for mold, or being aware of if your house has any type of mold or fungal issues. That's another one. And then healthy loved ones interaction, which I already touched on. Buy a monkey and a dog. Okay, so bengreenfieldfitness.com/Finland 2017 is where I've put all these research studies, all these slides, everything that you need to actually delve into this more, and all the different podcasts and articles that I have out there on the microbiome, because I know I just flew through a lot of stuff and some of you want to take a deep dive. So go to bengreenfieldfitness.com/Finland 2017. That'll get you access to the slides. Just let me know if you have any difficulty accessing those. Do I have any time for Q&A right now, based on our time? Okay, so I did not allow enough time for Q&A. However, I am going to be around here afterwards. Come up and ask me your questions about the microbiome, about vegetables that make you fart, about having sex with monkeys. Whatever questions you have, I'm happy to help you guys out, and you can always ask me through my website as well. So thank you all for coming today, and have an amazing time at the Biohacker Summit.